Welcome to the Inside Pitch. I'm Christopher Lockhart, the creator and administrator of this Facebook group where screenwriters, creatives, filmmakers meet to ask and answer questions and exchange ideas and information on the craft and business of movie making. I am joined, as always, by my co-administrator, the sagacious Ramesh Santanam.
Hi, everyone. Hi.
Hey Ramesh, how are you
Hi.
doing? Very a monumental day here in
Yes.
regards to the fact that it appears that our very long election has finally ended.
Yes,
So and that I think that is a good thing because it's been hard to work over the last few days. So
I bet.
So I'm happy that this is behind us, and now we can sort of move on and meet our guest today. Before we introduce her, I just want to give a shout out to our third administrator, Steve Enlow. Thank you, Steve, for all of your support. And of course, we have to thank all of our members on the Inside Pitch who watch these broadcasts either live or later on, and also to our YouTube watchers. We have a YouTube channel,
Yes.
Ramesh. I think we've got maybe like 3 or 4 subscribers, but hey, you know, it used to be 0 subscribers.
Exactly.
So it's getting better. All right, why don't you introduce our special guest?
Okay. I am happy to introduce LAURA TOFFLER-CORRIE, who is an award-winning author of the middle grade and young adult novels, The Life and Opinions of Amy Finowitz, My Totally Awkward Supernatural Crush, and the recently published Noah Green Saves the World. She has written for a variety of national magazines, such as Parenting and Storyworks. She's also a produced playwright, and her latest one-act play, Coney Island, was included in the production Glass Ceiling Breakers 2019, a celebration of women playwrights in New York. LAURA holds an MFA in dramatic writing from New York University School of the Arts and is currently working toward her doctorate in English education at Columbia University. She teaches creative writing and young adult and middle grade literature at Pace University, and will also be teaching nonfiction writing at Columbia in the spring. LAURA, welcome to the Inside Pitch.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Hey, LAURA.
Hey.
So a full disclosure, LAURA and I go way back. More than 3 decades now, LAURA. Are you aware of that? More than 3 decades.
Well, yeah. When you say it like that, it sounds awful, but yeah.
LAURA and I met in, LAURA, I'm just going to give him the down and dirty. LAURA and I met in, I would say it was August of 1986 in Greenwich Village at a mixer for the NYU MFA dramatic writing program. And of which LAURA and I attended together, and we became pretty chummy, I think. And I love LAURA, and I call her Laura La. But for today's purposes, I'll be very professional, and we will call her LAURA because she is a author.
Hurrah.
And it's been great to see this evolution.
Can I interrupt you for 1 second? Please. Do you remember what you said to me at that mixer that night? Because I remember. Well, actually, it was the next day. You said to me you were happy to meet me and you were so excited. And you went home and you told your mother that you met the only girl there who didn't look like Gomer Pyle. I'll never forget that. It was a big compliment. I was
ouch. Ooh, ouch. You know something, back then you could get away with that stuff.
That's right.
Yeah. Nowadays, I would be crucified for that. Golly.
Sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's all right. No. You know, we met a lot of fun people, and a lot of those people have gone on to great things, including Kevin Wilmot, who won the Academy Award for co-writing Black Klansman.
Amazing.
And so we're very, very happy for him. And one of our fellow students owns 19 cats.
Oh, yes, that's right. Is it 19? Did you get the number?
Yeah,
Wow.
that are actually in the house.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's getting an MFA is very meaningful.
I had 19 cats once growing up in Sri Lanka. So hey.
Wow.
But we lived in a huge house. It was a bungalow, and there were cats all. It was lovely.
Well, listen, I'm sure you just want a lot more fans because they're, people love cats. I think it's a little weird. Yeah, but you have one cat. 19 cats is a little weird. Laura, let me just ask you a question before we start to talk about your writing per se. Let's talk about an MFA, because I like to ask this question. I have an MFA, obviously, which is established that. You do as well. And do you feel that it is necessary, or how do you feel it helps, or do you feel it's a complete waste of time and money?
I think it's a little bit of maybe all of those things. I think that you have to go into an MFA program being having a sense of what you want to do, and being clear about who you might want to study with, and have some projects that you want to work on. I think that it can be a great experience if you have direction, because I don't know, I'm sure you felt the same way. They won't hold your hand. And I also think it can be a great experience if you get internships. I think that's critical too. I think that in retrospect, I wish that maybe I was a little older when I started the program, and a little less enthusiastic about just kind of meeting people and being in downtown in the village, and a little more focused. But we met some pretty cool people there, and studied with some big people, right? I took a class with Wendy Wasserstein, and she was a lovely person. And who was the one who recently passed away, the playwright? I forgot his name. It wasn't Ted. No,
I think he's been dead for a while.
Yeah.
He hated me. Do you remember?
I remember.
Do you remember that story?
I do.
All right, let's just for a second. We all had to write one-act plays. So I wrote this one-act play, and it was performed in front of a lot of the faculty. And then we would sit down and we would get feedback. And Tad Moselle, a Pulitzer Prize winning playwright from some play that nobody's ever heard of, he didn't just hate what I wrote. He literally eviscerated me.
He hated you, basically.
Yeah, and for 20,
oh my God.
It felt like an hour, but for 20 minutes, it was, I remember afterward, everybody's face, because we all went out to eat.
Yeah.
And Laura, this very empathic friend of mine, was just like, Chris, it looks like it's all over for you. It was brutal. It was brutal. And it wasn't constructive.
No, it was very embarrassing for us, and your family was there. But I have to say, I have to give you a shout out, Chris, because when that was over, you went up to him and you shook his hand and you thanked him for his feedback. You did.
That wasn't what I was thinking.
I'm sure not. But it just spoke to who you are, honestly, and your integrity. And I was impressed with that. No, it was bad. It really, Ramesh, you should have been there. It was just...
But something, it was probably the best lesson that I ever had. My skin was so thick after that.
Yeah.
So, and also I think I learned sort of how to, how not to give feedback through that. So did you have good experiences there? Wendy Wasserstein, obviously, an amazing playwright who we lost. And I remember how much you adored her. And you were a funny playwright, and you still are. It's true. In fact, I actually acted in one of Laura's plays. I don't like to tell people this, but in fact, the day before I moved to California, this was in 1988. The night before we moved,
that's right.
We actually shot Laura's play on video at NYU in the little black box.
Right.
And from what I understand, it ran for years on New York City public cable. And I recently got my hands on it, and I actually uploaded it to a secret link on Facebook. So it is, on YouTube. So, maybe one night I'll get drunk even though I don't drink, and I will share it.
You should. You were so funny.
With the group.
You were
so
funny.
it's out there, is what you're saying.
It is out there. You know something? Maybe I could put it in the. Maybe I could put it in the chat or something. You know, the link. I don't know. I might be a little embarrassed, but
I'd be embarrassed. I mean, it's dated. When you watch it again, you know, it's quite dated. But you were super funny, Chris.
But it's a funny play, and Laura has a very unique sensibility in her writing, and it's very like when people talk about having a voice, I truly think one of the first writers that I ever met to where I really understood a voice was through Laura. Oh. Laura just had a very specific voice, and it's really true to sort of who you are. So how would you describe your voice?
Maybe quirky, offbeat, sort of a little bit of the glass is half empty, but with hope, you know. And I like to observe people. I like what's absurd about people, you know, and I find people either respond to that or they kind of get pissed off at me. But I think that it's so important to keep that voice in any genre you're writing for. You know, it's critical. And that's what'll distinguish you, I think, from other people. Don't you think?
Well, 100%. And, you know, that's the one thing that people always, always say, which is that we're really looking for a voice, because a lot of people tell the same stories, right. You know, I mean, we really do hear the same stories over and over again. They're kind of, you know, they're archetypal or they're tropes, but when those stories are siphoned through a very particular point of view, point of view that is unique to the writer, then that's where we get the voice. And so I remember when you wrote your first novel, Amy Finowitz, and that I was really interested in seeing how your voice would translate also to a different audience, because your plays were not necessarily geared toward young adults.
Yeah.
And you know, to sort of see how you pulled that off. And you wrote that book in a really intriguing, kind of fun format. Why don't you just tell our watchers sort of how you told that story?
Yeah, it was, it's all in letters, and I guess it's epistolary. And I actually incorporated a lot of little plays and a lot of little bits and scenes, which I was drawing on my dramatic writing background. And it really came from the heart, because I had a friend in school and we would amuse ourselves by writing little letters to each other and little stories and little plays and little poems, you know, just to make each other laugh. And I think secretly I'm kind of stuck at 12, 13, 14 anyway. That's where that voice kind of worked well, because, you know, maybe I'm sort of arrested development a little bit there. But, you know, I felt like that was the book where I was just going to say it the way I wanted to say it. And because it was my first book and I didn't know what not to do, I didn't know I was breaking rules. I didn't know I wasn't supposed to do this or wasn't supposed to do that. You know, I think that's what made it feel like a very authentic experience for me. And of course, first person is always fun. You know, that's sort of an intimate way to write. And the letter, you know, kind of methodology worked because it felt very personal as well. But I'll tell you, I got my ass kicked a little bit on that book too, because, you know, it had sort of a Jewish character who meets up with a Hasidic boy, and they have kind of an adventure. And I think I sort of scandalized a lot of the Orthodox community because of that. And because it had a Jewish character and some Jewish themes, I was, you know, in line for that Sidney Taylor Award. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but really any Jewish book that's written during the course of a year, because they have the awards every year, gets considered for the award or some honor. They have a couple of awards. But anyway, I must have pissed some people off because I got completely shunned off the list. Yetta the Yiddish Chicken made the list of Jewish books. I swear it's a book. And I did not, you know. And I heard later through the grapevine that I just, you know, I was too blasphemous for some people. And that's the chance you take when you sort of, write with your voice and write what you want to write. I think that's something that you just have to understand, that you're going to have those ups and downs because of that. Some people are going to get you and some people just aren't.
Noah Green also has Jewish themes in it as well, because that truly is part of who you are as a writer. That is part of your voice. That's your experience. I remember when we did your play, and I was like, yeah, I don't know if this goy is all that, sort of convincing. It's not like I had to be Orthodox or anything. But yeah, it's you really sort of address just like a very specific part of the Jewish culture, right? Kind of like
Mel Brooks, kind of Woody Allen. I don't know if we can say his name anymore, but yeah. Separate the art from the man. I don't know.
Right. Anyway. Yes. Yeah. I'm okay with that. Right. So, and to me, it's fun. So it's like with Noah Green, there's obviously those themes there, like Noah is preparing for his bar mitzvah, for example. But these books are not written for that audience exclusively. No, not at all. Right.
And I'll tell you an interesting story about the business side of books, because when I originally wrote that book, it was just implied that maybe he was Jewish, because that is my sensibility, although I'm not a religious person. But the publisher was sort of like, could you make it more Jewish? Could you throw more Jewish stuff in there? And that's what happened. I had to kind of like amp it up a little bit for the publisher.
Yeah, so let's talk about the beginning, sort of how you segued. So, you were writing plays. When did you decide, okay, I want to write a novel, I want to write a YA novel? How did all that come about? Because I actually don't even know.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people from our program, including you and our friend with the 19 cats, although he didn't have them then, went off to California. And I was thinking about it at the time. And I think I even made a trip out there. And I just found that I wasn't quite fitting into that scene very well, And I think with maybe screenwriting, you're not only presenting your work, but you're presenting yourself, right? You have to go into a meeting and you have to be sort of charming and kind of funny, but not obnoxious, and sincere, but not boring. And it was like a lot for me at the time. So I decided I wanted to stay in New York, where I'm originally from. And there was sort of just so many options there. You could do magazine writing, you could do novels. And so I thought, well, let me try my hand at this. As I mentioned, I feel like that tween age is a good voice for me. And I ended up taking a workshop with a woman named Pat Riley Giff, who's very well respected in the kids lit world. She's written about 90 books. She's won the Newbery. And it was a fantastic workshop. And a lot of people actually ended up publishing from that workshop. And I just realized that this was a good space for me. And I wrote Amy Finowitz, I guess it was 2010. And that was sort of the beginning of when Kids Lit was taking off. It was around Harry Potter time. It seemed like an opening for me, and a way for me to express myself and to, work in the writing industry and be a working writer. So I just kind of took that leap. And I kind of never looked back. And also, once you enter that realm and you have an agent, they kind of expect that from you. It's very hard to say, oh, I'm going to write this YA or middle grade book, but I really want to write something else too. They want to keep you in a lane because they have their connections. It's a small community, and so I just kind of stayed there because of it.
So, did you develop Amy in that class, or did you develop it outside after the class?
I actually developed it before the class, and I'll tell you a funny story. It was a 5-session class, and the way it ran was that you'd submit your work, and then she would read it out loud. She'd choose work to read the next time you came. And I was so frightened that it wasn't a good story. I wrote maybe the first 10 pages. And I actually put it down and wrote another book in between that was some science fiction-y, weird, not my voice thing that was kind of bad. And I went back to this, and I was so afraid that she was going to read it out loud that I didn't give her the pages until the very last class, because I knew she was having a speaker come in, a man named Tony Abbott. I don't know if you're familiar with him, in the Droon series. And so the class was packed because people were coming to see him speak as well as the people who were in the class. And it was a terrible rainy night. And I thought, I came in and I sat in the middle and stepped over 100 people, and just to sort of, and I felt comfortable because I knew he was coming to speak, and there was no risk of me having to hear my work out loud. Turns out she gets a phone call that says he is having car trouble with the rain, and she had time to read one person's work. Mm-hmm. And she started to read my book, and I was just mortified. I really didn't have much experience in that kind of a situation other than DWP at NYU, and I was always mortified there. And she started to read it, and it started to get a response. People were laughing in the right places, and it ended up being a fantastic experience for me, kind of life-changing. And afterwards, she came up to me and said, you need to keep writing this book. There's something here, and I want to see what else you have. And also, someone in the class did say to me, also, she said, you're like the Jewish Woody Allen of kids lit, and so that motivated me. So for your viewers, I would recommend, taking workshops and putting yourselves in those uncomfortable situations where you have to share work, because you could surprise yourself,
Yeah, that's a great story, Laura. Sometimes fate has to intervene in order for us to perhaps break out of our comfort zone a little bit. Yeah. So so good for you. And all right, so then you write the book, mm-hmm. and then what do you do? So it's like, okay, so you've written a novel. Yeah. What do you do with it? Yeah,
good question. Well, also at the time, I found a little writing salon at a local Starbucks, which was funny. So we would talk about, strategies and how to find an agent, because what we knew, we didn't know much, but we knew that you really had to get an agent. So this is another suggestion for people who are watching. You should really, if you're interested in writing for Kids Lit, subscribe to Publishers Marketplace. It's a virtual newsletter that you'll get a couple of times a month. And what you do is they tell you all the deals that are made, the different categories of books. So they've got a whole section of kids lit books and deals that have been made for picture books, middle grade, and YA novels. And it will give you a little bit of a blurb of what the book's about, a couple of sentences, who represents the author, what publisher picked it up, and how much money they got, generally speaking. So what I did is I looked on Publishers Marketplace, and I looked for books in the kid lit arena that sounded weird, because my book was weird and quirky. And there was a book called, very politically incorrect at the time, called Big Deaf Fatty, which they changed the title. And I thought, well, this is a super weird sounding book. Who represents this author? I'm going to write to him. And that's what I did. I wrote to him, and he got back to me right away and said, send me pages. Then got back to me right away and said, I want to read the rest. This is another piece of advice for anyone who's watching. Finish the book before you decide to start sending it out, because that could happen. And we went back and forth for about 6 agonizing months of, oh, he was busy. Oh, he's going to read it. Oh, the holidays are coming. Oh, blah, blah, blah. Finally, he said, look, I'm too busy for you, but there's a new agent here who is loving your manuscript, and she would like to potentially represent you. So I spoke with her, and she said, I'd like to potentially represent you, but you got to lose about 100 pages of this book. It's too long. So she said, can you do that? And I said, of course, not knowing if I could do it or not, really. She said, well, get back to me. I said, well, how much time do you need? When do you want to hear from me? She said, well, in a month. And about 29 days later, she sent me a cash email, what's up with the book? And it just so happened that I knew that, she was serious about that month, and I had revised it, and I sent it to her, and it was agonizing, and then she signed me on. That was my first agent. I've been through a couple since then. But yeah, so that was the beginning. And then she went about the business of finding an editor at a publishing house who she thought would like the book. And because she was new and hungry, she really worked her butt off and found a home for that book.
So let's talk about the editing process when you're working with an editor. So now you lose 100 pounds off that book, and you make it presentable for the agent, who then presents it to an editor. Then does the editor have notes? So is this a little bit like, okay, so it's a little bit like the development process in Hollywood, the screenplay. So talk about that process.
Yeah. Well, the good news, and I don't know how it is in Hollywood at this point, but they have to buy it first before you start jumping through hoops. Is it like that there?
It is not like that here. No. Hollywood will do everything they can to get all the free work from the writer, and then decide if it's something that they want or not.
Yeah. So you have to plan on either like working through assisted living or, just kind of, But no, the money changes hands at this point and there's a contract. So at least it's a little more palatable, but it's a big process. I mean, depending on the editor you work with, it could be 6 months, it could be 8 months, it could be agonizing. I mean, those first 2 books I worked with the same editor at Macmillan, and she put me through my paces. And in the end, of course, she was right. I think all the changes made it a better book. And that's the attitude you have to have, that you're all on the same team and everybody wants the best book it could be. And, but, it can be irritating. Of course, it can be 18 months from the time the publishing house and the editor picks up your book from the time it hits the shelves. So, you're kind of like trapped in this situation. But it can be grueling. Now, with my latest book, there were very few edits, honestly. So you never know how it's going to go.
Can you talk about perhaps the kinds of notes that you might get from an editor? Like what specifically would an editor say?
Well, a good editor, and I've had good editors, kind of ask questions. They'll go, it's line by line, it's painstaking, and they'll say, can you make this richer? Can you enhance this character interaction? I don't believe this here, or ha, I used to love to get those HA exclamation points when a joke landed, or this needs to be pulled back, or, would this character actually be doing this at this point? Sometimes what's kind of terrifying is there'll be a note like, this chapter doesn't work. And then, that's pretty awful because the chapter before it and the chapter after it kind of hinged on that chapter. And, you have to make a determination, what am I willing to go to bat for? Do I just sort of give in and realize this editor knows what they're talking about? Or do I fight for it? How much of a pain in the ass do I want to be? You want to be easy to work with because you want them to work with you again. But it's a lot at that phase, at the creative phase. It's just a lot of digging and enhancing and getting another perspective on the characters in the situation and any kind of theme that you have. Mostly, it's not really a kind of punctuation thing at that phase.
What's the worst note that you ever got?
Oh my
it's just one of those really dumb notes.
Get rid of this chapter. That's a bad one. This doesn't work, this whole chapter. And I'm wondering, it'll never be like, get rid of this chapter. It'll be kind of like, I'm wondering if you need this chapter. I'm feeling like this chapter should go. Yes, comma, yes, question mark. And you're like, no, you want to write back a really nasty kind of, because then everything changes, everything shifts.
Right. So then how do you handle that?
Most of the time, as I said, I wanted to be, someone who was easy to work with, and I would find a way around that, and I would just sort of hunker down and curse a lot, eat a lot of devil dogs, and be upset for a while, and I would change it. But there was a time where I just kind of said no. I just said, I got to fight for this chapter. I think it works. I think a lot hinges on this interaction. I'll maybe make it shorter. I'll maybe do some tweaks. What would you suggest there? You want to make it like the project is the most important thing, not your ego. But sometimes you're right. you know? And I think in that particular situation, I was right. And the reviews at the end for that particular book sort of indicated that.
Well, you know, ultimately, as the writer, I always feel like, you know, yeah, you're getting notes. People have a different perspective, but still, there's still that gut feeling. You know, I always talk about the writer's click. I don't know if you remember this, but Milan Stitt. Do you remember the writer's click? Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
And that's, you know, so and for me, that still holds true, which is that when I hear a note, if the note feels right, there's this click or this bell that goes off. Because I really believe that ultimately, if you're really a good writer and you're really in tune to what you're doing, nobody's going to tell you anything about your work that you don't already know.
Yeah.
Often you are in denial about certain things about your work, or you are hoping that people won't notice this about it.
Right.
And then when those notes come out, you're like, I got caught. Or the little click goes off, the little bell, and you're like, yeah, that does feel right to me.
Yeah.
And then there's other things that ultimately don't initiate that click.
Exactly.
And it's those things that I think a writer might often want to hold his ground on, or at least have a good spirited debate over the issue. Because it's your story. Nobody knows your story better than you.
That's right. Yeah. And certainly with a book, your name's on the cover, you know, and you're the one who's going to be paying the price in the end. Yes, my name is on the cover.
It's so
it's
cute.
100%.
Look how cute.
It's a they got a fantastic illustrator.
Yeah, I want to talk about that. But yeah, let's talk. See, like right here. Look at the top. See, Camp Holla. That's Laura Toffler. All right, so let's talk about Noah Green. Interesting, by the way, a male protagonist.
Yeah.
But how did this whole idea come about for you?
You know what? That's maybe an interesting story that some people could benefit from, because I probably started that book 8-9 years ago, and I was the same workshop that I was taking, and I brought in pages, and people really liked the pages, and then I was just stuck. I had no idea what to do with this book, and I put it away, and I picked it up. I put it in a drawer, and I picked it up. I started writing some more. I sent it to an editor with whom I had a relationship. I had switched agents.
Laura, I'm sorry to interrupt, but was it the story that you didn't know what to do with?
Yeah, the story.
The story, okay.
Yeah, I cornered myself. I had sort of a funny couple of chapters, maybe 2 chapters, and then I just didn't know where the story was going. And I was with Writer's House at this point. I was with an agent there, and I sent it out to an editor with her permission that I knew, and sort of was like, yeah, would you be interested? And she was like, no. She didn't like the story where it was going. And I gave it to, you know, of course, my agent. She was like, no. And I put it away for years. And it just kept calling to me. I just liked the story. I liked Noah. I liked the character of this sort of very innocent, kind of socially awkward kid. And finally, I picked it back up and I said, I'm going to hammer this out. And I picked up some craft books. I actually look at you know, sort of movie craft books too. I like Save the Cat. I like Wired for Story. And I just said to myself, you know, plot's not my forte, but I need to sort of, you know, figure out where I'm going. And so I just kind of went from there, and I gave the new revised version to my then agent, and she was still like, no. And I sent it to someone else, and they were like, yeah, this works for me. And I ended up changing agencies, and sort of the rest sort of moved from there. And it speaks to the point you were making before about that click, which I knew I had something. And I knew somebody would eventually recognize that. And I was just sticking to my guns with that. But it was a long process with that one.
So do you actually have to pitch a story? So if you're going to talk to an editor, do you actually pitch? Do you have to like write a log line? And, you know, how do you communicate what it is that you want to write?
Well, you really have to go through your agent. That was a special situation, which it was someone I had worked with, and I had to get my agent's permission to even talk to that person. You know, this is, you know, an arena where, as I mentioned before, it's a very small community, and very few publishers and editors will talk to you and look at your work unless you're represented. So you almost have to pitch it to your agent first. And even though the agent is someone with whom you hopefully have a good relationship, you know, they're busy people. You know, you want an agent who's busy. That means they're working and they're getting work for other writers. And you have to almost pitch to your agent. So it is like a Hollywood thing in that regard. And you have to make it sound interesting and appealing and enticing. And then that's where you start. And then they work with you on it. You know, an agent, if they see something there, they'll work with you, and then they bring it to the editor, and then they have to do all the kind of tap dancing to get that sold. But, you know, an agent can say, and it happens to many people that I know, about a piece that you really are feeling, and they'll be like, try something else. And you really have to, you know.
Yeah, you know, screenwriters often work with their managers that way, where the manager will sort of hear the various pitches and then help to guide the writer toward writing a screenplay that might be more appropriate for the market, something that he believes that he could sell, and you know, that kind of thing. But so how would you pitch Noah Green Saves the World?
Oh my God.
Put you on the spot, Laura.
Yes, put me on the spot. You know, a goofy, socially awkward kid, you know, gets a message from his daffy grandfather that he has to save the world. And he goes to camp and he uncovers all these kind of intrigues with his newly made friends. And they realize that in trying to save the world, they're really saving themselves. How was that?
All right, and no, it's good, and of course, Noah is a aspiring filmmaker, and of course, part of his disappointment is that he is very excited about spending the summer at the David Lynch film camp.
Right.
And you know, again, you know, that's the Laura Toffler sensibility.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And he ends up at Camp Holla instead, because
right, he ends up at Camp Holla.
Yeah.
Holla holla.
Wow.
So in fact, when my son saw that, because he has started to read the book, he's with his mom this weekend, and he wanted to take the book with him. I said, no, it has to stay here right now. I need it for this. He wants to know if Noah's going to save the world or not.
Sort of does, yeah. He has an adventure.
Well, you know, I'm not telling my son anything. He has to read it for himself. But so talk about your process in brainstorming this book and coming up with the story, because you said that's not your forte, because your forte really is sort of putting people under a microscope.
Right.
I mean, you know, like that's what you do really, really well. And here you're writing something that's bigger.
Yeah.
So how did you go about plotting that out?
You know what? I realized that I went to camp, like a pioneer camp, which, can you imagine me at a pioneer camp? It was really bad, you know. So, and I was about 13. I was with two of my best friends. And it was sort of like, there were no adults, you know. The counselors were only a couple years older than we were, and we were sort of in the woods, and you can imagine, you know, like the kind of havoc and chaos, and I was a dorky kid, so I wasn't even having really any fun. But there was a situation where a couple of kids got caught stealing stuff and hiding it in the woods. I think it was they were stealing, you know, alcohol or something and hiding it in the woods. They got kicked out, and so it made me think about, you know, pulling on my own experiences at that age and writing a story that had to do with some mean kids who got into trouble. I had to sort of formulate some kind of secret. I thought, well, what's interesting to a kid? Asteroids, something with outer space, you know, the world is in danger. And the grandfather, who kind of keeps coming in and out, is a World War II veteran. And, he was involved with the code talkers of that time. So he really feels that this asteroid is coming to destroy Earth. And I just sort of put it together. And a lot of times, because I'm so character oriented, even though I try so hard to plot ahead of time, I end up really just letting the characters go. And the goofier the characters are, the more they kind of bump into each other, the more the plot kind of evolves from there. And I probably do a lot more work than I need to do because I don't outline as well as I should. But I had to have those main components at play. What does Noah want? What gets in his way? What are the plot points? The basics of writing a screenplay too. You have to use that for a novel as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Mr. Ramesh, I'm going to come to you in a moment.
Oh no, sorry. There's suddenly
that's
ray
all
of
right.
sunshine through my screen.
I would say, hey Ramesh, do you have a question? And then he gets all like, so I'm giving you a lead. I'm going to say, Ramesh, I'm going to come to you in a moment. So you can get your question ready. But you mentioned the illustrator, Laura, and I wanted to talk about that. So how does that work? How do you get an illustrator? Do you get to see the illustrations? How does any of that work?
In a nutshell, it's pretty much out of your hands. The publisher will find your editor and your publisher and their marketing team will find an illustrator for you. And you either like it or you don't. This book is kind of an upper middle grade or a middle grade hybrid because sort of graphic novels are popular now. So there are more illustrations than would typically be in a middle grade book. But typically, it's the cover that you have to, where they bring in an illustrator. And you get a chance to look at the cover. If you hate it, you can weigh in. But again, you want to be a writer who's decent to work with. And you pretty much smile and nod and say, oh, it's wonderful. I happen to think it is wonderful. I really feel very grateful that they found this illustrator for me because I think he captured the humor and the innocence. And I think it would appeal to a kid, those illustrations. They're really dynamic and great. But in answer to your question, you really don't have a say. And you never want to bring in a friend. You can't go to your editor and say, hey, listen, I have a friend who's a tremendous artist. Even if it's true, they don't want to hear it.
They like the people that they work with or who they know. And have you actually reached out to the editor? Have you spoken, to the illustrator? Have you spoken at all to the illustrator?
No, I just emailed him to say that I was so pleased and excited about the illustrations. And he was like, yeah, no. No, it's strange. And I know people who write picture books where I know someone's a funny thing. She wrote a picture book, and in that genre, it really belongs to the illustrator. There's maybe 10 words in a picture book, although the author conceives of the book, and she found out that her illustrator was sending out Christmas cards with pictures of Gaggy or whoever the little character was, and like, Merry Christmas from me and Gaggy or whatever. And she's like, well, hello, I'm part of this, but clearly not, but yeah.
One of our members had this question. He said, voice is so intangible to me. I'm weirdly funny and kind of deep, but that's not unique at all. Do I change or give up?
Don't give up. So they're funny. And what was the second thing they are?
Kind of deep.
Kind of deep. I don't know. I think that there's a lot of stories that you could sort of take a running jump at, even if it's a story that's been told. And I'm sure, this is true, of course, in Hollywood. It's like how you twist the story, what's your angle on the story. There's no new stories. And find a character who represents you. Find a character who's kind of funny and kind of deep, and think about how they perceive the world as they walk through it. Start getting those characters talking. Put them in a situation where there's something they want and there's something that gets in their way, and see where that goes.
That's what we talk about all the time here, right? Especially when we constantly talk about log lines. It's about who is the protagonist, what does the protagonist want, and what stands in the protagonist's way. Right. And that is just the most easiest way to sort of crystallize a story. And often what I discover when I talk to new writers is that they might have, you know, who is the protagonist, and they might even have what stands in the protagonist's way, but what they don't have is what the protagonist wants. That's always what's missing.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
it's very vague, or it's or it's not substantive.
Yeah.
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 So,
you were one of the first people who said that to me, actually. I remember years ago, I sent you something that I was writing, and the main character wanted like world peace or something. And you said that to me, I remember. And you were like, you know, it's nice to want world peace, but it might be easier if she wants something specific. You know, then you have a story you could write. And I was like, oh, wow, thanks, Chris.
It all started with you, Laura. You were the first person that got me on that, you know, on that tangent. But yeah, right. It makes more sense. Have the character do something in regards to world peace that's very specific. Like, you know, she needs to get to the Middle East to convince ABC to sign a peace treaty.
Yeah.
Then that's specific, and that's a specific goal, and then all of a sudden you can actually see a story evolving from that, rather than something that's too vague.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
But that's really, for some reason, that concept is hard for a lot of the writers, you know, in our neighborhood here, to grasp for some reason. You know, it is a challenge.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that I'll often say to people when they have a vague goal, you know, for their character, I'll say, gee, it sounds like it could be more novelistic. Is that an insult? I mean, so you're saying that really, even in a novel, that a character really should have specific wants and needs and goals.
Yeah. I mean, you know, if a novel can be very boring if it just sort of meanders. And I think that absolutely in a novel, I mean, I think what, you know, I talk about with my students too, when you see a movie that you love or you read a book that you love, you remember the moments, right? You remember the character and the moments and some theme. But the fact is, you wouldn't have read the book if it was, you know, a bore and it didn't craft. You know, I think we're talking about craft, which I hold very dear to my heart. And you have to get those elements in.
One of our members, Kim Wells, was surprised at hearing about the sort of independence of the illustrator to the author, because she self-publishes, and so, you know, she loves giving the illustrators her vision and seeing what they come up with. So, so is that a real difference between the world of self-publishing and what's the opposite?
Traditional publishing.
Okay,
that's what. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you know, if you like, I can give you a little bit of my take on that, self-publishing and traditional publishing. You know, self-publishing is an artistic pursuit, and I think it's fantastic if somebody has a vision and they just want to pursue that vision. But I'm not really a fan of self-publishing for a number of reasons. I think that although there is occasionally a success story with that, the reason why it's in the newspaper or in Writer's Digest or wherever you read is because it's uncommon. You know, the big issues with self-publishing is that you don't have editorial involvement, and you don't have a way to distribute the work, really. So I think you know, there's nothing wrong with that if you want to express yourself artistically. But if you see this as a business, you kind of got to play by the rules. And, you know, once you sign a contract, you know, they kind of own you a little bit. You know, speaking to that, I actually got caught in a write for hire. You know, Chris, you talk about that my strength is my voice. And this might be a cautionary tale for some people too. It really like sucked away about 2 years of my life, because I could never quite, you know, find the right mojo for somebody else's vision. But there was a contract and the money had changed hands, and I sort of got stuck. So, you know, that's sort of the downside of traditional publishing in a way. But, you know, it depends on what your goals are. You know, I think it comes down to that.
Right. And you, you don't feel that sort of the likes of Amazon, for example. And again, I really know nothing about the publishing world, so just slap me around if I'm sounding really stupid. But the likes of Amazon don't present a good platform for self-publishers.
I think it's hard enough being out there in the world when you've got a team working with you to market your book and find the best illustrator for you, and an editorial team and a marketing team and all of that to find traction and to find an audience. And reviewers are reviewing you and awards. That's hard enough. I think that it's very hard to go it yourself. I mean, to be fair, I don't know a lot about that world and how it's changing. But the good news about living now is that you can get your stuff out there. The bad news is that everyone's got their stuff out there. I don't know how it is in Hollywood. I guess it's sort of comparable to people making indie films, small indie films. It's not an easy road. I don't know. I think that also, traditional publishing, you have the gatekeepers, you have the agents who have to read the work first and vet it. And the thing is, of course, we've all heard the stories where, a bunch of agents turn down, Harry Potter or Twilight. And then, of course, they cry in their cereal every morning. I think about 12 people turned down Harry Potter. But if you send out your work to a lot of people and everyone's saying no, it just might not be ready. These people, they're not gatekeepers and who want to say no. They want to say yes, but everybody wants to make money. And they want to say yes because they feel something's ready for the green light. So you know what I mean? So you don't have, in self-publishing, it's very tough. You don't have a team. You don't have somebody else weighing in with you. I don't know if it's a way to make money.
Have you ever heard of these there are these services, I guess, where you can bring your idea to them and they will write your book for you?
I've heard of that, yeah.
I mean, that's like, okay, wow, and of course it costs you money.
Yeah.
And I guess in the end you have a book.
But is it yours? I mean, who does it belong to?
And is it good?
Yeah, right.
But yeah, I think it's interesting, the idea of sort of working with the team, or at least getting feedback. So clearly, if people are self-publishing, they really should be sharing their work with a circle of people that they trust to at least get some kind of feedback, I would assume.
Absolutely. Workshops are great. You teach workshops, don't you, Chris?
I do.
Yeah, I'm sure they're fantastic. No, really. And he didn't tell me to say this to anybody. I know you, Chris, and I know you're a fantastic teacher. But yeah, it's like that story from before. Share your work, hear your work out loud, get into a situation with other writers, and really kind of vet the work first, because that's the thing that really counts, right? You can spin things every different way. It's got to be on the page, and you have to put your best foot forward. You don't get a second chance to make a first impression.
So do you still workshop your stuff?
I do. Right now I've been more involved in like playwriting workshops, because that's sort of a new area for me. It's not a new area.
Well, you are revisiting it. You're going back to your early love.
I love that. That's true. It's hard. I think also it's hard once you're published to find a writer's group of published people. And it's also hard to find a group. I mean, that's why a workshop is probably your best bet, I think, for someone who's starting out. Yeah, I mean, you just always want to sort of be active and out there and not get caught in your head and be alone with the work.
So you have a husband, you've got 2 children, you've got a couple of dogs, you're teaching. How do you like what is your writing schedule? What does that look like? I mean, you are a professional writer, so are you writing 9 to 5? What does your day look like? How do you structure your career?
I used to sort of feel like, as most of us do, you have to write every day. I don't know that I write every day. I find that when I have a deadline, I mean, of course, deadlines are our friends, and that's another reason to take a workshop, because you will have deadlines imposed on you. when I have an idea, when I have a deadline, I can sort of write all day. And I'm very good at multitasking. I'm very good at sort of pushing the pause button on myself and then running to make dinner or running to pick somebody up or, you know, whatever. But I think that I used to have the luxury of writer's block. I like to put it that way. I think when I had less responsibilities. But the minute I had my kids and I realized, okay, they're napping. If I don't work now, I don't work. I mean, you know, you, Chris, you know, you have a child as well. And you just have to, you know, be passionate about what you're doing. And as I said, those workshops, those deadlines really help. And so for me, if I'm really excited about an idea, I'll just sort of go all day and just take those little breaks. And then maybe after, you know, like a week or two, I'll take a little break for a couple of days and try to come up with another idea. But, you know, it's not a set schedule anymore. I just don't have the luxury of that.
So one of our members has, it's a big block of questions. And in fact, so many questions that they got cut off. So I'm just going to read these. What are some of Laura's influences from her childhood? Books, films, artwork, or music? So let's start there.
Okay. Well, you know, I don't want to sort of tell you how old I am, but I guess it's going to come out sooner or later. But, you know, I loved sort of the punk movement of the, you know, late 70s, early 80s of The Village. I was one of the first Bruce Springsteen fans. I was about 16 when I discovered him. My friend's brother was listening to him. I was madly in love with Born to Run. I had my turntable and I kept turning it on over and over and over and over. I love anything. Again, you know, I'm invoking his name, Woody Allen. I loved, you know, the classic books, the Beverly Cleary, the Wrinkle in Time. And when I started getting into theater, I just loved the absurdist plays, the Moliere, the Beckett, anything that turned life on its head, you know, that looked at the world from a strange place. Actually, politics now. I mean, listening to Trump is just the ultimate lesson in theater of the absurd, you know, how people convince themselves of things and then sort of twist it all around, and how people think, you know, and they don't say what they mean, they don't mean what they say. But I think that anything that was offbeat, anything that was sort of anti-society, you know, I grew up in a little town in the suburbs on Long Island, and I hated it. I was the ultimate misanthrope, you know, talk about Moliere. And I think I was very influenced by that. I had an editor who said that, you know, I was like a funny underdog, you know, that was my voice. And, you know, pull on those experiences where you felt like you were outside of society, where you felt like you were passionate about something you read or something you listened to. So that I think that worked for me.
This member also wants to know, we're going to go way back, when did you discover that you wanted to be a writer? When did that realization happen to you?
Really, really early. You know, I remember being 5 or 6 and reading a limerick about a leprechaun, honestly. And I don't know, something kind of clicked. And I said, this is cool. And it was in elementary school, and I used to write poems. I would sort of wake my parents up in the middle of the night because I was sort of a night owl kid. And, you know, say, I have a poem that I want to read to you. And they were pretty gracious about it. And as I said about my first book, I had a friend and a couple of friends who were all sort of writers and readers, and we would write funny stuff to each other and just to crack each other up and amuse ourselves. So it was really kind of before the age of 10, I kind of knew that that's who I was.
Thank you. I'm just trying to go through, because there's a lot of stuff in here. You've ever received your books. I think maybe we kind of covered that. Well, no, I think we did. Somebody wants to know your favorite feedback, but you said that you like the ha.
The ha.
You said
yeah, I love the ha. That always made my day.
They're asking about your upcoming project. So what's next?
Yeah. Well, I actually just took a 10-minute play workshop, which I was excited about, because sort of that's the new thing around New York, especially on Zoom. You know, no one can sit through anything that's long. But I'm working on something with my agent that's a little retro, that takes place in the 80s, and about a girl who kind of, escapes to New York and has a little bit of an adventure, and gets involved a little bit with the punk music scene. And I should mention too, for your writers, here's a tip. It's nice to write retro stuff, because it's trending a little bit, but also because if you're writing about a kid character, you want to take out the cell phone. It really brings the story to another level of high stakes when you've got a kid or a teenager who's somewhere and does not have a cell phone. So that's a good way to sort of circumvent that whole situation. Because, Chris, when you and I were growing up, if you would go out, you'd say to your parents at the front door, "Bye, I'm going out," and they just hope they'd see you again.
By the way, Ramesh too. Don't leave him out.
I don't want to age you, Ramesh. I'm sorry, but it's true. You would sort of, think about that kind of parenting. You were like, "Bye," and they were like, "Where you go?" And you're like, "Out with my friends." Can you imagine having any idea of how to get your kids, or whether, and you're driving and you have to read a map, and it's like you can't even see the windshield, and you're unfolding the map, and so it's nice especially in kids lit to go back to those simpler times.
Where I grew up, it was always, "Christopher, you come home when the street lights are on."
Oh.
Yeah, so that was when the street lights came on, then that was the signal that I had to come home. So, of course, there would always be the call, because we have to go inside to my neighbor's, into the neighbor's house, your friend's house, and make the call, pick the phone up off the wall, and dial it, and say, "Mom, can we please stay out a little bit longer?"
Right.
Those details are sort of, they're lost. Because,
but it adds tension, right?
No, absolutely. Yes. In fact, I met with a writer. He wrote a pilot about basketball, and it's set in the early 90s or something. I don't know anything about basketball, but I asked him, I said, "Why did you choose to set it when you did?" And he said, "Well, because the frenzy in the NBA was at its highest at this particular time. But also, I didn't want to have to deal with cell phones."
Right. No, everything's solved. There's no stakes. Yeah. Interesting.
So maybe nowadays your character's got to drop the phone and lose it, right? It's got to fall down into the sewer with Pennywise or something, and you're not going to go after it.
Right.
Or the battery runs out.
The battery runs out. There you go. Okay, that works too. Yeah.
That's what I read a lot of those, where the battery happens to run out. Or they forget their charger. They're getting in and goes, "Oh, I don't need it." Yes, you're going to need it.
Yeah.
I guess soon the writer's got to come up with some inventive ways to lose the phone, because it really does. You're often plotting something, and you're just thinking, well, he could just use his phone.
Exactly.
End of movie. So yeah, it's tough. Somebody wrote, "While listening to this chat, I realized what essential scene is missing in my latest script. Thanks for the inspiration." Look at that, Laura. See that? You're changing lives right here at the inside pitch.
I'm glad I could help. That's wonderful. Yeah, that's great.
Ramesh,
can I ask a quick question?
Ramesh, I see you through the gauze.
I know. I don't know.
Gauze. What's happening?
It's like this sunlight, haze of sunlight that's shot through my room now.
He's kind of like Lucille Ball in Mame. They just, that he looks 20 years younger through all of that.
Yeah. The reason I'm actually here is so that I won't inconvenience my cat.
Oh yeah. He has one cat that's the equivalent to 19 cats.
He's very vocal.
Yeah.
But I wanted to talk about comedy. You write comedy, and humor tends to be sometimes regional, rather local. And so how do you go about, can you talk a little bit about how you write your comedy, and also how to sort of broaden it so that it's not sort of, local, and that it does travel well, for the lack of a better phrase?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think for me, I always try to find a main character, as I've said before, who just isn't quite fitting in. And then I find characters for that person to bounce off of. So my main character is always walking into a situation where it's already set up where he or she is awkward. And I get people talking. You know, I love to write a lot of dialogue, and then maybe I pull back on it. But there's no better way to get to know your characters and to get the humor of a situation, have people at odds, people from different walks of life or different circumstances who want different things. You know, don't forget your secondary characters, people. Those are important too. They have lives and they have wants and needs and obstacles, and they're just butting up against each other. I think if you keep the humor authentic and you don't look for the joke, I mean, this is sort of tropey advice, but it's true. Then the humor comes out of the sincerity of what the characters want, and they just can't figure out how to get it.
Yeah, like you don't really write jokes, you know.
No.
You're not like a jokey writer. It's these sort of comical observations, and that you sort of watch these characters, and it's comical, but it's comical also because we recognize sort of the lunacy in that character as things that maybe we do or the way we think.
Yeah.
And like that is your gift, where you are able to find those things.
Yeah.
Because you do have to have a certain kind of eye to be able to look at human behavior and say, gee, this is like really kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
And by the way, not just in behavior, but just through your observation of life in general, or, you know, it could be an establishment, you know, it could be the name of an establishment that you think is silly, or just the idea of the David Lynch, you know, film camp.
And I can help your reviewers with that too. I think that what you're saying is right on the money. You have to have presence when you write. Put yourself in the shoes of your character. The character's not out here. For me, the character is always me. And you mentioned before that, oh, this was a male character. We didn't really talk about that, but it doesn't matter, because the character always has to be that piece of you. And if you really are sincere and you get into the mind and you walk in your character's shoes, I think that starts to come more naturally.
So let's address the male character issue, because your other protagonists were females, and so here you chose a male, and you're allowed to do that. And did you get any kind of criticism, like, Laura, you are a female writer, why are you not presenting strong female characters? Do we need another strong male character? So what was sort of the debate going on there? And you know, yeah,
I just, you know, sometimes, and I don't want this to sound politically incorrect, but when you write a female character, it comes with a lot of baggage about the female character. Sometimes when you just want to write about a person, it's sort of easier to write it through the eyes of a boy, because a boy, I think, is just kind of moving through the world, and maybe a little bit of, you know, not paying attention, preoccupied way. So it just seemed like the sensibility for this story felt like a boy to me. Maybe girls are just, you know, more observant about what's going on around them, more detail oriented. Sometimes girl characters like to please other characters. This character is just kind of doing his own thing. And I honestly, I don't know, I never feel, I never have a problem writing boy characters. You know, it depends on what serves the story for me and what story I want to tell. But I think that you do get a lot of kickback. I don't know if you want to even go there in terms of sensitivity. And I think that you know, there's so many wonderful things about people being more sensitive about characters and points of views and diversity. It's a fantastic time in kids lit. It's just opening up, and everyone should have a voice, and every kid should recognize themselves in a book. But as a writer, you have to be so careful about what persona you take on. I really feel, and I don't know if it's the same way in screenwriting, but I would not dare to write a character who was of another ethnicity than I am. It's just verboten completely, and you will get your ass kicked.
How much of your own life or moments from your life or just anecdotes or whatever it is do you include in your stories when you're concocting them? Or do you at all?
Yeah, no, I do all the time. And it's sort of the life that I wish that I had, maybe. The life that I had, the decisions that I wish that I had made, the confidence that I wish I had had as a kid, just kind of going here and going there, and you know, having a goal. but a lot, a lot of the little details too, about setting. I love setting. And that's something I pull a lot from places that I've been.
Ramesh is always there with a good question. Anything else, Ramesh? I don't like to, I don't. Sometimes I feel like I'm not allowing Ramesh
no,
to
not at
express
all.
himself.
No, this has been fascinating.
Because I'm pretty sure you're back there. I'm pretty sure.
I know. I have no idea why this is today.
It's funny.
I take the sunshine as a good sign.
It's kind of cool, actually.
It is. It's very gauzy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, do you get writer's block? And if so, how do you sort of plow through it?
Well, I think writer's block, and Chris, tell me if you agree, is just fear. It's just kind of being insecure and being frightened that you're writing badly, or you're being stupid, or you've lost your talent, or you never had any talent. I think one of the best pieces of advice I ever read was to allow yourself a shitty first draft, and write it on your hand, write it on your wall, embroider it on a pillow, mean it, feel it here. Really let yourself write a shitty first draft, and don't
a vomit draft. I often refer to it as, yeah.
And once you sort of let yourself do that, it becomes a little bit easier. No one has to see it, just you. And I think writer's block, also you need deadlines. That's why I sound like a broken record. But if you could take workshops, and this is a perfect time to do it, because you can take a class at Oxford if you live in California. You can be anywhere. And deadlines help with insecurity and writer's block, because you got to do it. You got to do it. It's a lesser of two evils. Do I want to show up without any pages and look stupid, or do I want to show up with pages? Even if they're not great.
Somebody has an odd question, and I like to ask these odd questions.
Hit me.
Do you get a referral bonus when you give your agent new authors?
No.
Is there such a thing in that field as a referral bonus?
I've never heard of that. I mean, a lot of agents nowadays, especially the better agents, you must have a referral. I mean, that's how I got the agent that I'm with now, who I'm very happy with. I'm at Rosemary Stamola Literary Studio. So you have to have somebody introduce you for a lot of people now. But no, I've never heard of that.
All right, that's interesting.
Is that a thing in Hollywood?
No, certainly not. No, certainly not. You get like a pat on the back, maybe, or
thanks. Yeah.
What is this about leprechauns, gnomes, and leprechauns?
My poem about a leprechaun?
I think so, yeah.
Channeling that.
Yeah.
Does it get easier for you to write now when you're starting a new novel, or is it still the same sort of angst or tension or anything like that, or has it gotten easier?
Absolutely easier, because again, I've internalized that shitty first draft mantra, but I know my craft better. If there's a problem, and Chris, you probably feel this way too. You sort of have I hate the word formula, but you have a method to solve the problem. And the more you write, the more confident you get. So I think that it's always challenging, but I definitely feel that, you just have to keep practicing. It's working a muscle like anything else.
And writing a story, it really is a Rubik's Cube. It really is about problem solving. Mm-hmm. I'm a firm believer that there is absolutely no problem in a story that cannot be solved. Every problem in a story can be solved. It might mean that you have to change something significant in the first act, but anything can be solved. And that's what I love about the process. To me, that's what's most fun, because when you crack that, when you figure that out, to me, that's always the accomplishment. It's like, oh God,
It's very rewarding, and I agree with you 100%. It is like a puzzle, and you can figure it out.
And it's fun. So, So what else should our viewers know that we haven't asked you? What is it that maybe you'd like to talk about? Every now and then there's things that people want to talk about that they weren't asked, and they're like, yeah, I wish that person had asked me that question, but he's such a crappy interviewer. So what is it? What is it that maybe we haven't asked, or any sort of words of wisdom?
Well, I tend to be very positive with my students and positive with other writers. And I think that I just like to share that when I started out, I didn't know anyone. I didn't have any connections. I don't really believe in connections. I believe in networking, but I don't believe in connections. I've never had one work out for me.
What's the difference, Laura?
The difference is to think that if I give this to, you know, Uncle Morty's tailor, then, you know, they're the person I need to know and they're going to like open the door for me. That's a connection.
Okay.
Networking is when you take classes, you know, whether it's a formal MFA program or workshops, you go to events, you join the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, which is a thing. Some of your viewers might want to go online and look into that organization, where you start meeting people and talking to people who have similar interests to you. That's networking. But I think that, you know, you can make it work. You can do it if you figure out the right way to do it. And you just keep at it. I think it's sort of like flexible perseverance, you know, is the best way to put it. You know, you want to stay true to who you are as an author, and you want to just keep working at it and know that you can make it happen. But you do need to be flexible too. You know, if you're writing that story and nobody seems to be getting it, either maybe it's time for another story or it's time to put that one in a drawer and revisit it. So you have to listen to other people too. But, you know, most of the people I know, especially in the kids lit world, I don't know how it is in Hollywood, didn't know anyone either. And, you know, they've made careers for themselves. They found good agents. Their books were traditionally published. So, yeah, so that's just what I would like to say.
I'm assuming that the kids lit world is pretty competitive though, yes?
Very. Yeah, it's gotten worse. Yeah, I mean, Hunger Games, Twilight, you know, that just changed the game. Harry Potter, of course, changed the game for everyone. Yeah.
Do your books have, oh, sorry.
No, Ramesh, you go.
I wanted to talk about, if you can, about what do they call them? Sensitivity readers?
Well,
do your books go through that too, or?
I think everyone's just a sensitive reader. I never heard of somebody who specifically does that, or it wouldn't surprise me if that's a thing. Are you talking about in terms of, you know, being sensitive to other people of different ethnicities?
Right, just to sort of make sure there's nothing, for the lack of a better phrase, offensive in there, or that
he doesn't want anybody to say anything bad about Sri Lanka.
Oh, please go ahead.
You know, it's a very complicated, nuanced topic because, again, it certainly is way past time for there to be everyone represented, especially in the kids lit community of books. Right. And I think that I remember just another little story. Chris, are you familiar, Ramesh, are you familiar with All of a Kind family stories? It's a series of children's books.
No. Well,
when I was a kid, you know, I picked up this book. It was called All of a Kind Family. And I was probably about 8 or 9. And I was shocked because in the first couple of pages, this family had a Sabbath dinner. They were Jewish. And it blew me away because I'd never read about Jewish characters. I mean, it sounds silly now, but that wasn't a thing in Kids Lit. So, you know, that was sort of life-changing for me. And I think every reader should have that opportunity. Having said that, you know, you can't breathe anymore. I mean, it's really, really sensitive. You have to be so careful. I actually had an editor turn down the Noah book before I found the editor and publishing house that bought it, because she felt that Noah I was saying he was autistic, and I wasn't portraying the autistic community properly, which is a fair thing to say, except I didn't intend for him to be autistic or on the spectrum. He was just an awkward kid, you know? So that's an example of how careful you have to be.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah.
So we have another question. This person wants to know, have you ever considered creating little dolls, calendars, or products from your characters?
Merchandising.
Yeah.
Merchandising.
That's a great question. You know, I don't know that many people, unless they are, you know, in the Harry Potter category, really do that. I think that's a lot of, you got to draw on your marketing skills for that. And if you're really good at that, I say go for it. But it would be hard to get that out there and distribute that. And it becomes in the end a matter of how you want to spend your time. So for me in the Kidslit world, what you really want to focus in are foreign rights. I don't know if you know anything about that, but that's a big deal because you want your agent or your publisher, whoever is representing you in the contract on foreign rights, to be able to sell your books to different cultures. That is just straight money in your pocket. They don't even take a cut of that. So I think with regard to that question, that's probably more of where my energy would go, you know.
Laura, do you think that your books, because again, you have such sort of an East Coast, you know, Long Island kind of mentality.
Yeah.
Does your humor translate overseas?
It depends where, you know. I know that I've gotten sort of fan mail from kids in England. You know, I know that some books do well in Asia, believe it or not. It depends. I mean, that's a good question. We'll find out because that's something that hopefully, you know, my publisher is getting on that as we speak. But, you know, you just don't know. But probably less so than maybe like a fantasy novel or something that is less sort of ethnicity specific or metro specific.
Somebody's asking about your teaching, and we should talk a little bit about that, where you're teaching and what you're teaching. Specifically, this question is, how does being a teacher affect your creativity and your writing?
Yeah, that's a great question too. I love teaching, and I'm sure you do too, Chris. I mean, it's very inspirational for me to be part of the creative process and sort of foster someone else's creative process. And the more I teach about what, you know, preach, then the more I practice it myself.
Yeah, you learn so much through teaching. I mean, I learn so much when I do these, you know, these interviews or even a workshop, or even when I'm listening to people's log lines and giving feedback.
Yeah.
I'm learning all the time.
Yeah, all the time. Yeah, the students teach you, and it's very inspirational. I feel very grateful to have opportunities to teach.
So talk a little bit about where you're teaching and specifically what you're teaching.
I teach at Pace University, and that was also one of those stories where I had no connections. I decided that I wanted to teach, and I just started building a resume. I was teaching, first I started at some community colleges, doing some continuing ed classes. I wrote to the chairwoman at Pace University of the English department. I was like, hey, I'm a kids lit author. You know, do you have any courses that I can teach? And over the years, I developed a specialty because I was teaching every once in a while. they'd give me a creative writing class. Mostly there was a lot of sort of compositional classes that needed to be taught. But now I'm at a point where I can happily say I don't teach the composition classes anymore. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it was just sort of grueling. And I teach writing for children and tweens. I don't know why they didn't call it children and teens, but they refuse. And all the kids end up writing YA books anyway because they're college-age kids. And I teach young adult literature, and this semester I'm going to be teaching middle grade literature. So that should be kind of interesting. And in my journey at Teachers College at Columbia, I'm going to be teaching a nonfiction class in the spring to teachers. And I have absolutely no idea what that's about. Like, they better tell me soon because I don't know.
And you're pursuing a PhD. You have more degrees because you also have a degree in counseling, don't you? Am I right?
It's school psychology. It was when I came right out of college. My parents were like, do this. And I was like, okay, you know, I don't know what else I'm doing. I'm an artistic person. I got to feed myself. And I hated it. It's not my vibe.
You've got like thousands of degrees, and now you're going for a PhD.
Well, I want to continue teaching. I mean, as I said, I love teaching. And I found that teaching at a college, you're really limited unless you have that degree. As I said, they give me creative writing classes now, and I'm grateful for that. But if it's not available that semester, then I'm kind of out of luck with it. So I want to position myself better.
Okay, so it's really more of a career move in some ways.
Oh yeah, it's not that I love school. No, it's a career move. Yeah.
Okay. Jim Barrett says, I get bombarded with marketing emails for my books. And he asks, what is the best way to market books for an unknown writer?
You know, again, distribution is tough. I'm presuming that's self-published, because if it was traditionally published, there would be a department at the publishing house that would handle that for you. I think it's tough. I think find writers panels. Oh, you know what? I actually do have a piece of advice. Go around to, well, now no one's going anywhere, but when the world opens up, if you start at some local libraries where there's actually people, there's traffic in the library, not like the small town library, and pitch a panel, pitch a writer's panel. It's hard to get, like if you're writing for Kids Lit, it's very hard to get kids to come to a panel unless you're, you know, you're J.K. Rowling. But writers like to hear about writing. And if you have a panel and yourself and a bunch of other people who are writing, that's a great way to market your books. And you get some of your books and you have an interesting panel and you talk about the writing process and you sign and sell your books afterwards. I would suggest that.
Excellent. Mr. Ramesh, anything?
No, I think, let's see if I have any other, no.
I like to just wait and just sit in silence as Ramesh is like, do I have any more questions?
No, but no, the questions I had you already asked and she answered.
Yeah,
So
we're just so thorough here at the
I
Inside
know.
Pitch.
You are, both of you, yeah.
Well, it has been 90 minutes, so we went over our time, but
Right.
Laura's a good storyteller. And these were good. This was very easy. This, right, Ramesh? This was very easy interview.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
it's wonderful.
This was nice. This was nice and easy. It's been a very stressful time, and Laura, you just eased us into just a very informative and relaxing interview. And I so appreciate your time. And where can we find Noah Green Saves the World?
Anywhere. Yeah, I mean, you know, it's in Barnes and Nobles, Amazon, Target, Walmart. If you go into your local indie store and they don't have it, ask them to order it from the publisher. But you can get it anywhere.
By the way,
yeah.
No, you go ahead, please.
No, I was just going to thank you for having me on. This was so fun. You guys are awesome.
What about? This is just, it's so bad. We're going to end it. And then wait a minute. What about you talk about doing panels at libraries. What about like book signings? Could you potentially find a local bookstore and pitch yourself and say, hey, maybe we could do a signing here? Are bookstores open to that kind of thing, especially if it's like an independent bookstore?
Yeah. If you are self-published, probably not. I mean, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but that's probably, you're going to come up against that obstacle there. If you're traditionally published, yeah, but I'll tell you a quick funny story. I had a friend who had a table. She was traditionally published. She went to a Barnes and Noble. They let her set up that little table, and she was kind of sitting there by herself most of the time. And somebody finally came by, and she was all excited. She thought this woman wanted to talk about her book, and the woman was like, "Excuse me, where's the ladies' room?" So, yeah, I mean, panels are good because you get other people in on it. So you're not embarrassed alone. And then writers want to hear about writers and the writing process, and you can get more people in that way. Just setting up a table can be quite embarrassing. Yeah,
that's funny.
That's a true story. Not me,
well,
though.
I think we got to leave it on a high note. Laura Toffler-Corrie, author of Noah Green Saves the World. Thank you for donating your time here today to talk to the members of the Inside Pitch. We really appreciate your time.
It was my pleasure,
yes, thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity.